rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to my Modern and Modest, of course with myself, Noshina Ghani. And on Modern and Modest, we try and bring you interesting, relevant discussions that each and one of us can identify with. So with us today, we have Nadira Chippa, who is a part of Modern and Modest. Alhamdulillah, she avails herself for us as often as she can. And today we discuss happily ever after. So Nadira, Alhamdulillah, what a beautiful topic, and I'm sure most of our viewers already have an understanding of what do we refer to as happily ever after. So thank you so much for coming on and joining us in Modern and Modest, and maybe you can give us some insight on the title that we're discussing or the topic we're discussing today.
Assalamu alaikum to the viewers as well. I'm not new to Modern and Modest. I'm here as a regular guest, and it's always a conversation with Noshina. It's always just flows. So inshallah, happily ever after is our topic for today. And happily ever after, Noshina, you know, it resonates with so many of us, mainly as females growing up. When you think happily ever after, what triggers? It triggers a fairy tale. It triggers so many stories that we have heard before, that we have seen, and that we, you know, somehow in our hearts hope to have in our life, that happily ever after ending, that fairy tale ending, that how could you say, the idea of having that life after all the obstacles and challenges, to say, well, I have made it and now we're going to live happily ever after.
Okay. Right. So Nadira, we understand that marriage in Islam, in our deen, means a lot to us.
Definitely.
We know that the day we step into marriage, Alhamdulillah, we've pleased Allah, we've completed half our iman. And you know, as the Quran states, that marriage is supposed to be tranquil. You know, you need to have that love, warmth, affection between husband and wife. But many of us tend to view marriage as a foundation. Yes, it is a foundation, but very much family ties. Now, is that all that marriage should be about? Why is it that we forget that it's supposed to be about warmth and love
And understanding.
And we tend to put foundation, and yes, family ties are important, but how much of energy are we giving to family ties, and how much of energy are we giving towards our relationships?
That's so true, because when we think of marriage, right now the mindset of marriage is very negative amongst the youth. The mindset is such that there's so much of divorces that are happening. It's more than ever now than it used to be. And the mindset that they're going into marriage with is different that people used to have. So now it's more like, what can I get out of this? You understand? What can I receive from this? And going forward, there's so much of expectations. There's so much of, I need to be the perfect wife. You know, I need to be the perfect mother. And marriage itself is not perfect, it's imperfect. We are imperfect humans. So hence we're here to bust that myth of happily ever after. There is no happily ever after. For us, happily ever after is in Jannah. Alhamdulillah. That is our happily ever after. But yes, marriage itself is beautiful. The sanctity of marriage, the happiness, the peace, the tranquility you receive in that union of marriage is something that Allah Ta'ala created for us, not on this earth. He created for us in Jannah. And the reward you receive from just smiling at your wife or smiling at your husband or holding his hand is sadaqah on its own. So what does it tell us about marriage? How beautiful is this union between two souls?
So let's speak about the beauty of marriage. We've chatted earlier about there being so many divorce rates amongst our, not necessarily older couples, but young couples.
Across all ages.
They haven't even gotten to experience the beauty of marriage.
Definitely.
And you hear of divorce rates very early in marriage. So what are the aspects of having a beautiful marriage that perhaps maybe these younger couples are not identifying, and we tend to be focusing more on the negative as opposed to the positive? So what are we missing? What is a beautiful marriage supposed to be?
You see, when people enter marriage, when they enter nikah, today expectations versus reality is two different things. So you're expecting this perfect marriage, which you see on social media, which you see, you know, in books, and which you read all the time, and media portrays this to be something that even if you're not complete, so to speak, marriage completes you, which is wrong. No marriage can complete you. You have to complete yourself before entering into that marriage. Also, we look at marriage as a cure. Perhaps if your son is a drug addict, get married. Here's the cure for that. You know, if your daughter is going out clubbing, get married, and that is not the cure for it. When you find happiness in marriage, it's going to and into marriage with the correct mindset. So you know that marriage is something I have to work on. It's an ongoing basis. It's not that I'm going to be happy, you know, or complete just as my nikah takes place. No, there's a test in that as well. So our spouse is our test for us in this world. So what we have to understand is to receive that happiness, that barakah, and that understanding in our marriage, we have to make that effort in that marriage itself.
I like what you've just mentioned now, that marriage is something you have to work on. So very true, because you've never known this individual.
Definitely.
And now you've stepped into marriage, which is a relationship where you're now starting to discover this new individual. Your personalities differ, and I guess it's something, it's a learning curve every day. You learn more about an individual on a daily basis, and I guess we've got to be working on it. But let's speak about guidelines for our young girls and our young boys that are seeking a partner.
Definitely.
What do you look for in a spouse? What is the ideal partner?
When you seek a spouse, and when you're seeking that spouse, and you're making dua, and a lot of our young people out there, today the importance is placed on materialism, the importance is placed on appearance. A lot of importance is placed on appearance. And look, I have this idea of what my husband should look like, or what my future wife should look like. She should be conform to society's idea of beauty as such. Or my mother has an idea of what, you know, my spouse should look like, and what qualities I should look for in them. But as parents and as individuals, we need to realize that when you seek a spouse, and when you're seeking that spouse, it's not for a week. It's not for a day, it's not for a month, it's for a lifetime in this world and in Jannah, inshallah. But the main point in seeking a spouse is character. It's character. I mean, you could say get to know somebody, and that means dating, and that means going into a relationship before marriage, and you could spend 10 years getting to know somebody, but if you do not live with them, Noshina, you would never know that person.
Absolutely.
So it's more character. When you seek a spouse, seek kindness in that person. Seek to see if they can give a beggar the same respect they give to a businessman. You know, see the relationship that they have with their creator and how strong that is, and with their family as well. And also this intuition that we all have. There's this little voice inside that says to us, no, I'm uneasy about something.
Yes.
It's really Allah Ta'ala telling us that, look, I'm giving you the sign, this warning, that this red light in front of you, and when we ignore it, and we go into the marriage and we say, no, it's me, you know, it's not him, it's okay, I will ignore this. If you know that he's being abusive before you enter into marriage, do you expect him to change? Really? If you know that she's immodest, or she's an Instagram bikini model, do you expect it to change after marriage? No, you can see this already. So we need to use our intuition as well when seeking a spouse.
Okay, so Nadira, we're discussing very much our young girls and boys that are looking to get into a relationship, choosing a partner. And alhamdulillah, you mentioned that when we choose a partner, we've got to look at the character of this individual, which is so true. Apart from character, we mentioned that your relationship with your creator, your piety. So I guess when a female is looking at a male, you've got to think of this person as being the father of your kids. One day you want to have kids. What type of father would he be? Or vice versa, what type of mother would she be to my kids? What example would she be? So do you think that our younger people are looking for those qualities in an individual? You know, if we think back in the day, that's why marriages maybe lasted longer, because people looked at those qualities. Do you think our young people are looking for those qualities?
No, Sheena, today the focus has shifted. The focus has shifted so much so that appearance, materialism comes into play. So the mindset of the youth, the mindset of the parents of those youth, the main focus has changed and shifted so much that character personality, your connection, and your piety, which sets the foundation of other relationships, that respect that you have for elders, that kindness that you have for children, that has changed. That main focus that, those elements that they looked for in the past, that is now changed to flashy cars, to sea-facing mansions, to big bank balances, to six-pack abs, to size 0 figures. That's what happened, and hence the divorce rate has increased, because the focus and the objective of the nikah itself and the qualities and those beautiful qualities that you seek in a spouse, that has shifted.
Okay. So Nadira, just before we take an ad break, how do we change the mindset of the youth? How do we get them to come back? When I say
basics.
come back, and how do we get them to look for character? How do we get them to look for piety? Because that is indefinitely the platform for a successful marriage.
You see, now the parents need to come into play. When we're raising our children, when we're raising our girls and our boys as well, we need to, as much focus as we put on studies, correctly so, they need to be independent, they need to have a stable job and be financially independent. More so, we need to highlight what type of people they should be. Instead of looking for qualities in that spouse, try to be that person as well. Instill in them kindness, instill in them such good values that automatically when they are seeking a spouse, that's what they look for, because it's a reflection of them.
Alhamdulillah. Okay, we'll take a quick ad break, and when back we'll be speaking more to Nadira about happily ever after. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to Modern and Modest. And with me today, alhamdulillah, we have Nadira Chippa, myself, and the topic is happily ever after. So Nadira, a very interesting topic today, and I'm not sure that we'd actually be able to cover everything on our show today. But we spoke about the youth and what we need to, what they need to look out for when choosing a spouse. And we touched on how we could change our youth from looking for character and piety first, as opposed to everything else. And you touched on why it is so important on how you raise your kids, what you instill in your kids, which is so true. But let's speak about marriages in itself. People that have been married for a while now and that have kids. Let's talk about the challenges that those married couples have. Let's say you're married for 10 years plus, you've had your kids, you've put so much of your focus and energy on raising our children, instilling the right qualities. What happens in those first 10 years of life? Do you actually feel closer to your spouse? Or is there a gap that starts growing between you and your partner because you're so preoccupied with raising these kids?
Definitely.
Let's chat about that.
Okay, so going into marriage itself and having children, you see, at that point in life and in that point in time, our entire priority has changed. It's no more just your husband, it's not just your wife. You're a mother or you're a father, and you need to set that example for your child. Children don't just do what they're told, they do what they see.
Absolutely.
So we need to set an example for our children in terms of, irrespective if they're 5 or if they're 30 years old, they're going to look up to you. Because as dad, that is your hero. He's your first hero. Mom is a super mom. Mom is a hero herself. So what do we do in that instance where we want to try and instill these values in our children, but we're doing the opposite? So here you're saying to them that you should be kind to others, you should be respectful to others. But what are you doing? You're shouting at your wife. Is that what they, okay, dad's saying something and he's doing something else. And then when you see mom and then she says, you know what, you need to dress modestly and before you go out, and you need to be home before a certain time. And she's not at home and she's not dressed as she would like you to be dressed. So we lead by example. Again, when you say that there's a distance that happens between you and your spouse once the kids come into play. Yes, when they are small and they need you more than anybody else. Your time, it shifts now. Your focus shifts. Your entire time is spent on raising these little humans to being, good human beings and sending them off into the big world and hoping that they do their best and they're good people with wholesome values. What happens to your relationship with your husband then? Kind of takes a back seat. It takes a back seat, and we need to prioritize that relationship. Yes, it takes a lot of effort. Personal experience, I do have a 5-year-old, so I would know. So it takes a lot of hard work again that comes into play, where you need to make the time alone time for your spouse, because at the end of the day, as much as we embrace motherhood, and this goes to the sisters mostly, we embrace it so much so that we forget that we have an identity outside of that.
Now let's chat about that balance. We've got to make the time. You in this marriage, and I think marriage is work every day.
Definitely.
You've got to work on your marriage, and you've got kids to raise, and you've got to work on raising them in the way that you should be, because they're an amana, and you have to raise them into, I wouldn't say ideal, but into good human beings.
Definitely.
Because what you put in them is effectively what they're going to take with them
throughout their lives,
and even in choosing a partner. But when it comes to relationships, and when it comes to our kids, would you think that there's a lot of pressure on women, one, and secondly, that's perhaps why there's this gap? Because remember, they're not just her kids.
Yes, definitely.
It's our kids as a collective.
It's a team.
It's teamwork, and as a woman, you have the responsibility somewhat of being supportive and being there for your partner, and then being there for your kids, and of course the extended family.
Definitely.
So how do you think men can play a role in this, in not allowing that gap?
And not having that
distance.
mindset as such.
So what do we do there?
You see, a lot of other males and our men in our community, in society, and the world at large, were brought up with that mindset that, you see, a mother is a nurturer, which comes naturally to us. We are nurturers. We worry about every detail, and we know every detail of our children and our husband. But what happens is, when this mother tries to be a perfect wife, a perfect mother, a perfect daughter, a perfect sister, a perfect aunt, what happens to her? She crashes. Inside of her, she feels that I am not happy. My cup is not full. Again, I'm not happy. I'm giving out so much. I'm pouring out of an empty cup every single day of my life. And this goes on for years, Sheena, sometimes a lifetime, in fact, where you hear of women saying, I sacrificed my life for my children. You often hear that. And for me, that really hurts when I hear that, especially for women who are elderly. So an entire lifetime has passed, and now she's alone, and she says, I sacrificed my life for my husband and my children. What does that mean? That means that she didn't have time for herself. She did not actually fill her own cup with happiness. She did not have a year or a month or a week or a day to live for herself. It means that a husband needs to come into play. It is teamwork. It's a partnership. It's never just one person's job to glue everything together, because when that happens, she shatters on her own.
So let's speak about what advice we could give husbands or men.
Definitely.
What role should they be playing in order to keep that bond? Because it's very common when women get married, the first year or two is great, and then when you have kids, you're so focused on your children, you tend to lose that relationship with your partner, because
and even with yourself,
even with yourself. So how can we sort of not allow that to happen? How can we not allow this gap? What does a woman have to do, and what does a man have to do in order to not let that happen?
You see what?
Because by the time your 10 years have reached, it might be just
too late
in your relationship.
Exactly, and then you're living as strangers in a loveless marriage.
So
you see?
What do we actually
You see, the men, the brothers out there, they need to understand that when they become a father and when you become a husband, this role is extremely important. It's not just to sit back and let her take over, but rather meet her on that journey. It's a journey of parenthood together. If, for example, let's just take a practical example. If she's a stay-at-home mom and you are back from work, do you know when you open that door, she expects you to take over from there. She awaits your arrival because she wants to unload, she wants to unwind from that day. So a simple example, if she has to give the child a bath, you do the evenings, you take over the load of laundry. There's no harm in doing household chores for a man to do household chores, and we need to raise our sons that way. That it's fine to help your future wife or your wife in terms of doing the household chores, in terms of having a career and balancing home as well, in terms of helping the kids with homework, doing a project with them, and giving your wife time to just say, you know what, Take an hour to yourself, take a day to yourself, take a week in fact, and I'm going to be handling things from here on. And when the wife knows that, okay, my husband is working so hard, it's a bit difficult right now, and here I'm taking over for now, and we're doing this in a way of there's a partnership, such a beautiful understanding that it creates more love between them, because now responsibilities are being shared.
And I suppose it also allows you as a couple to
yes,
have a balance.
and a bond.
Right.
And a bond, because now she appreciates you. Wouldn't it feel good for a husband to know my wife appreciates me so much because of the little things that I do?
Do you find that in relationships, spouses show gratitude to each other? Are we ashamed to express a thank you? Is it something that people are too proud to do?
I think we take it for granted. We take our spouse for granted a lot. You know, it's something that's simple as bang a loaf of bread, and he remembers to do that. And oh, it's his responsibility. She cooks a meal. Oh, it's her responsibility. No, it's not. She's doing that, and he's doing that out of the kindness of their heart. So a simple thank you could turn that entire day and make it bright and illuminate your hearts. Also, it creates such a unique form of love. Gratitude creates that love. Gratitude towards our husband, gratitude just by expressing it to them in a note, in a smile, in words, simple gestures, but it changes the entire outlook for that day.
And I suppose that example that you're setting for your kids is something that would stay with them if
Definitely.
you show gratitude towards each other, or your kids see it as teamwork.
Yes.
So it's something they would then take
And aspire to
when
have.
they get into a marriage and have kids of their own.
Definitely.
But Nadira, we hear very often that it's not just the so-called newlyweds that have divorce rates very early in their marriages. We find that people that are married for years now are having to face divorce, unfortunately. We're going to wrap for an ad break, and when we're back, you can maybe give us some insight on why does this happen and how can we avoid getting into those situations.
Definitely.
So when back, we'll be chatting more to Nadira Chipa. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to Modern and Modest. And our topic for today is Happily Ever After with Nadira Chipa. So Nadira, we chatted about divorce rates, not just affecting newlyweds, but also affecting people that have been married for years. Why do you think that is so prevalent today?
Today, we have divorces perhaps 2 months into the marriage, perhaps 20 years into the marriage, perhaps 30 or 50 years into the marriage. It happens. It does. You see, in the past, divorce and the divorce rate was lower than now. Why is that so? It's because the concept and the sanctity, as I said, of marriage has changed. Also, we need to be aware of what's going on around us right now. We need to be aware of the trends that are happening right now. If you look at it, if you look at the mindset of people, whether they are young or the older generation, how easy it is today, Noshina, to have an extramarital affair. It's a click away. We have social media, we have technology. We have two people in a marriage that's sleeping next to each other, but they're attached to a screen.
Okay. So you mentioned that it's so easy just with the click of a button to actually find yourself in a relationship with someone else other than your partner, and that would come with lack of communication.
Definitely.
Or you mentioned a loveless marriage or loveless relationship. But how do you avoid getting to that
Yes, definitely.
stage in your life? How do you bring about, obviously the spark's lost.
Yes.
How do you bring that spark back into your life?
You see, when we say extramarital affair or seeking happiness outside the marriage, it doesn't always have to be another person, but also maybe activities. Sometimes maybe the husband just doesn't want to come home because he feels my wife is nagging too much, or she's on the phone all the time because she feels that I just don't want to have this conversation with him. It's just going to end up in an argument. You understand?
And you pretty much shut each other out.
You shut each other out because the problem's already there. It's festered. So as you said, that spark, those butterflies you get when you first meet each other, it's about going back again to the basics, flirting with your wife. It's not haram to flirt with your wife. It's not haram to be all dressed up for your husband. And yes, the men also groom yourselves for your wife. You know, we always hear that women should groom ourselves for our husband, but what about the men? You know, if you apply perfume, you apply things to look attractive outside the home, but what about within the home? We need to add that spark. By adding that spark, what do? You need to go back to what attracted her or him to you. You know, look at them with those eyes that fell in love with them. You may be 50 years old, you may have changed, you have grey hair now, you have a pot belly, but that soul is still there.
Yes.
That love is still inside of you. So ignite that spark. How? By spending time alone.
So it's all about falling in love with your spouse
Definitely.
all over again,
All
which
over
is rather
again.
exciting, because
is.
years into your marriage, you can try and rekindle what got you so attracted to each other, and how do
Definitely.
you bring that back into your life. I think that apart from lack of communication, why else is it at all possible that it's not, okay, yes, lack of communication, but maybe spouses are not attracted to each other any longer? We spoke about grooming, but can you actually lose interest in your spouse after years of marriage?
Definitely.
I mean, why else would you be seeking for a relationship
Outside
marriage?
and appearances, again, it does matter, where you feel that, okay, now after giving birth to 3 children, perhaps 2 children, she has picked up a weight, which is natural.
Yes.
You know, she's got stretch marks now, which is, to me, stretch marks are badges of bravery, because you know, you brought a whole new person into this world. But what happens when your spouse now, which is your husband or your wife now, you're looking at your spouse through lenses of hate, or through lenses of disgust? Why? And it happens, Noshina, it happens, where you compare your wife or your husband to what you see in a picture perfect world, because that's what the world we live in. It's picture perfection. People have filtered pictures. People have pictures of themselves, you know, looking all great and happy, and that's a glimpse of their life. It's not their reality. But what happens is you compare that to your spouse, and it makes you feel that you don't have enough. And sometimes it goes to such a level where you insult your wife or your husband based on that. And there's words that are spewed out in that time that actually stay with them for a lifetime.
You obviously can't take that back
No.
once it's out. But we spoke about 1, lack of communication. 2, you're not attracted to your spouse any longer. And I think women tend to go through this very often because of pregnancy or hormonal imbalances,
Definitely.
weight gain, and it's rather sad that
Age as well.
your age and your partner is no longer attracted to you, and the gap grows. So what advice can we give to women that are going through that? Because it
It's
must
hurtful.
be very difficult.
Definitely.
And what advice can we give to our men then? Surely they need to understand that as a woman, she's gone through this, but she's given you beautiful children in that
Definitely.
process, you know. And how can we get people to look
beyond that physical appearance,
Yes.
and beyond that facade that's outside the home? In fact, there's just one thing that I could think of that's basic that you can do, is, again, appreciate her. Appreciate the fact that she actually, you know, she's raising your children. She actually gave birth to your children. You know, she took the time to now look after the family, so to speak. And yes, perhaps she has a medical condition as well. Hence, you know, she
Yes.
looks that way, or she's feeling that way. But if you appreciate her for the little things she does, and you look at her, again, not through lenses of picture perfection, but through lenses of love, of understanding and mercy, what do you see? You see a beautiful woman. You see the same woman that you fell in love with 20, 30 or 50 years ago, or the man for that instance. But again, when you appreciate her, when you appreciate her loyalty to you, and all that she did for you, and all that she does for your children and your family, and again, she sacrificed her life to bring your children into this world. Leave alone her body or her face or her physique, but her life to do that for you and for your family. And she sacrificed so much of her own happiness to give you that happiness. That makes you now spark something in your brain that says that I appreciate her more than any Miss World.
Nadina, we chatted a lot now about appearance and how appearance gets your spouses to lose interest in each other, which is rather sad. But why do you think this happens?
Okay, today this happens a lot due again to the picture perfect world that we live in. So again, comparisons come into play where you feel that look at this Instagram, for instance, model compared to what I have, and comparisons come into play because we're human and it happens. You understand? It happens that where even if you feel that your house is a bit shabby, look at that house. You know, it comes back to our mindset where we feel that the grass is greener on the other side, but perhaps we don't realize it could be astroturf. So it's not like, it's the personality and it's the character that captured you in the first place. So again, seeking a spouse, what did you look for? Did you fall in love with her because she had a perfect figure or that he had six-pack abs? No, I fell in love with his character, his patience, his kindness, the beauty within. So that keeps, with that intention in mind, that keeps you attracted to your spouse irrespective of their size or their skin color, how much you could change physically, but your soul is still the same.
Pretty much your love for each other should be unconditional.
Definitely.
So irrespective of, you're not supposed to be looking out for the flaws.
Yes,
if that's how we
because
understand
you're
it
going to
to be.
find flaws if you look for flaws. That's what we're going to find, imperfections. Nobody is perfect.
Okay, so do you think that this should be a constant reminder that even we need to give ourselves, because look, social media isn't something that we can
Avoid.
It's
Definitely.
there.
It's there.
And maybe you've got to remind yourself that yes, that you can't avoid looking at it. Fine, it looks great. But that's also going to change in time.
Yeah.
And you've got to think about, look at your partner rather with the love and the foundation that you have started out a marriage with, as opposed to comparison. Does that bring us back to not being content again?
Again, with what we have and not being grateful, all goes back to gratitude. Again, when we look at what is fake and what is real today, what is fake and what is real in this world today, because we have to go back to looking at things for what they are. If you look at a picture, is that real? Is it truly real? Is that person really that happy with themselves? They could be a size 0 and still be unhappy with themselves. She could be overweight and still be happy and confident and have peace of mind and that oomph in life. So again, it comes back to gratitude for having what you have before it becomes what you had.
Okay, we'll take an ad break, and when back, Nadira, we can chat more about marriages, the challenges of marriages, because not all of us are fortunate enough to be living in our own homes. We also have extended family. Does that actually affect your relationship with your spouse? We'll take an ad break, and when back, we'll be chatting more to Nadira Chipa. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to Modern and Modest with myself and Nadira Chippa, and the topic for discussion today is happily ever after.
Yes.
So Nadira, we'd like to know more about marriages and relationships where not all of us are fortunate enough to be living on our own. For various reasons. You've got to live with extended family. One, maybe just looking after them. Two, maybe it's not financially viable to be having two homes. How does that affect your marriage with or your relationship with your spouse?
Okay, firstly, Noshina, when we get married and into this institution of marriage, it's not just your spouse, but their family as well. So I'm sure everyone heard of the saying, when you marry the entire family.
Yes.
And it's true to such an extent. And when you are living together, so you're sharing personal space, and you're entering into a home that has different rules, that has a different environment. Your husband or your wife grew up in a home that's different to yours. So every home has different set of a different mindset, as a different atmosphere. How do we now collaborate? And how do we show kindness to each member of that family without losing that connection with your spouse? Because what could happen is that you feel threatened by a certain member of their family, perhaps your mother-in-law, perhaps your father-in-law, and you feel threatened in a way that my love for my husband is now being sabotaged or taken away from me because he's spending time with his parents, or you spending time with yours, or he could be living in your home for that matter. And we tend to neglect that thought. So we say, no, it's okay. And the distance creates separation between two hearts. Again, another factor that creates so much of distance between spouses. Why? It's because a spouse, a man or his wife, cannot actually side between the mother or the spouse. So you have a spouse in the center, you have his wife and his mother, and they're both pulling onto ropes of authority, of power, of love. And they're saying to him, you know what, if you love me, it shouldn't be this way. And then you
Yes.
have your obligation towards your parents as well. So how do you balance this? Firstly, shukr, alhamdulillah, a lot of the couples that are getting married now live in nuclear families where they are happy with the in-laws and they have a good relationship because they're living in their own space. But if you have to share that space, Noshina, 24/7, what happens? There's definitely going to be challenges that arise. There's definitely going to be some sort of friction because you're in personal space, you're sharing that space over years, over lifetimes in fact.
Yes.
And sometimes you have a sick or elderly person that you have to take care of. So what happens in that instance, before the power struggle actually happens, is you feel that somewhat and somehow there's no privacy. There's no privacy in your marriage. So how do we now change that? Is by you cannot actually say, you know what, change your mindset or just take them as your own. That doesn't work. That doesn't work for so many, and that puts so much of pressure onto a new bride or a
But
new
I
groom.
think even taking them as your own, which should be, because you need to view them
No,
as your
definitely
parents.
as your parents.
But in saying that, you've got to prioritize time.
Definitely.
I think your in-laws or your extended family should also understand that there should be boundaries, that
And
up
there's
until this
generation gaps.
time we could be together, but after a certain time, then I think a wife owes it to her husband to spend that time with him, or likewise a husband owes that time
to his
the
wife, to be spending that amount and that quality time,
Yes.
with each other. And having said that, you could be kind to people or actually embrace them in that light. But what happens when challenges arise is that you find that there's a form of guilt that arises within the child itself, the child that's staying there. I feel guilty because I spend more time with my wife, or I feel guilty because I spend more time with my mom or my dad for that instance. What does your wife or your husband do in that time?
Yes.
They become isolated, they become alone, and that creates, as I said, more of a separation between two hearts.
Or maybe just, again, an opportunity to look out.
Definitely, or to look elsewhere, or to
Yes.
be on the internet, for example, and look for company, because that's what a
Your
human being,
companionship,
a
yes.
companion needs. So in that instance, when you're taking care of your parents and at the same time you have a spouse living in the same house, we need to prioritize our time, our love, our kindness, and our understanding.
And let's just say we need to take away guilt. You shouldn't feel guilty spending time with your
Definitely.
partner
Or your parents.
or your parents for
Yes.
that matter, because these are people that you love. And I think it's all about balancing time and having understanding
same with children.
amongst each other. I
Definitely.
mean, pretty much what you do with your children. To
Yes.
a certain time, we together, and to a
And
certain
time
time,
you're not.
You're not.
And also as adults and the older generation should understand that the generation gap is huge.
Yes.
So the mindset that this new bride or this new groom is entering your home into is different to your mindset when you were entering into a marriage. So they may have careers of their own, they may
Yes.
be juggling a job and looking after their family. So how can you now help them as you would your own son or your own daughter?
So, Nadira, we're actually going to be coming to the end of our show, and I'd like you to just give some nasiha to those seeking spouses and maybe to those that are struggling in their marriages. What advice could you give them? How can they overcome this? And inshallah, we'll have less divorce rates within our community.
Inshallah. This topic could go on for days and we could speak about this for days. There's so much that we haven't covered as well. Inshallah, we will in the next episode. But all I want to say is, when you're seeking a spouse and when you're seeking those qualities of kindness, of patience, of understanding and of love, remember the Sunnah, remember the Quran, and remember to ask Allah Ta'ala for guidance, because honestly it's Allah Ta'ala that guides us towards what is good and what is best for us. And when we are in the sanctity of a marriage, and when we are in this marriage for 5 years or 50 years perhaps, never lose sight of who you fell in love with. never lose that gratitude in your heart that says, thank you for being who you are, and thank you for being my life partner that Allah Ta'ala chose. And keep that in mind that marriage is not easy. It's not a bed of roses, but it shouldn't be a bed of thorns either. It should be something that you both as partners work towards every single day of your life.
You know, you mentioned very nicely that we need to reflect and maybe, look at what the Quran says to us about marriage. And we very often come across this beautiful verse where Allah mentions that as a husband or a wife, you need to be garments to each other.
Definitely.
But can you give us more insight on that?
Yes.
You know, garments we understand as a covering,
as clothing.
and as clothing.
Yes.
But when it comes to relationship and how beautifully Allah has put it in the Quran, can you give us more insight on what that actually means?
You see, when you look into the eyes of someone that has lost their spouse, what do you see? You see vulnerability. You see someone that is fully clothed, but she feels naked and exposed to the world. Why does she feel that way? Because her garment has been taken away from her. That garment of protection, that garment of happiness, it's a fortress that's built around you. So when Allah Ta'ala tells us that he or she is your garment from Allah, Allah Ta'ala is telling us this garment is providing you with beauty, with happiness, with understanding. It's your protection in this world, my sisters and my brothers, where your garment needs to be taken care of as well. You taking care of this, and to know and appreciate the value of that garment, look into the eyes of those who have lost theirs.
Alhamdulillah. And just some advice to couples that are living in extended families. And I think this is very crucial and very important, where this advice is not just to married couples, but also to the extended family, how you could play a role in actually saving a home or saving this marriage.
Definitely. You know, Sister Noshina, before I leave, I'd like to give you an example of what's going on where new brides or new grooms are being even physically abused by members of their family or members of their spouses' families. And this happens because there's a lack of understanding, there's a lack of kindness, you know, there's control issues, there's toxic relationships again. So my advice to those people entering into a joint family or living together, or even if you're not living together, you're always going to be interacting with your spouse's family at some stage. Kindness and respect. Those two elements will take you so far in life that even if you do not feel that, you know, you want to interact with them for that day or for that hour, for a lifetime, know that they are your test from Allah Ta'ala as well, and they are your husband's Jannah. Also, Noshina, I just want to tell the viewers and also that they need to remember that counseling is out there. Healing of the heart, healing of the mind, healing of the soul before you enter into marriage. Even while you are going through a problem, when you have this intense problem that you feel that you cannot actually help yourself in it, seek help, seek healing. We have many workshops like Happily Ever After, marriage and motherhood workshops. You will not be labeled as somebody that's going through, you know, a dark time in your life if you attend these workshops. All you're doing is that you're seeking help, that you're seeking assistance, and you're getting that advice, that motivation, that inspiration to now handle the situation and to get a beautiful result and to grow from it, inshallah.
I suppose also hosting these workshops makes many people realize that they're not in it alone. There are people that are going through the same or similar, and it becomes very much a support structure for individuals.
And other women, when they start speaking, they realize that, you know what, I can take strength from my sister.
Yes.
I can take her strength, and if she could do it, so can I. And if she could make her marriage work in a certain technique and by doing it quite differently to how I thought it should be, then I take comfort in knowing I'm not alone.
Alhamdulillah. Well, Nadira, thank you once again for joining us on Modern and Modest. It's always very interesting having you on our show, and I know that we have so much to talk about.
Definitely.
But inshallah, we hope to see you soon on Modern
Jazakallah so much for having me, and it's always a pleasure speaking to you. It's not like an interview, it always ends up in a conversation. So Jazakallah so much for having me on your show.
Well, that was Nadira Chippa with Happily Ever After. Until next week, shukran for tuning in, and I look forward to chatting again next week, Monday. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.